Hello and welcome to another show of the Red Sisterhood Movement. I'm your host Lisa, and this is also your host.
Helen, hi.
Um,
I'll sing songy today.
Hello, like I was about to say disclaimer notice here or forewarning. I'm a little bit hyper, and I think it's because I'm tired, so I'm like extra hyper because I'm tired. So I may not make a lot of sense. And if that's the case, Helen will come in on the side.
Maybe
I'm using that first because I never normally make sense.
yeah, I was just going to say maybe you need a disclaimer at the start of everything that we do where you're like, I might not make any sense.
I might waffle for 45 minutes.
I'll try to
I wish it was never that long, I promise. So, Helen, today's show is a special show close to both of our hearts.
It is.
And today's show is one of the reasons why we created the Red Sisterhood, which was formerly the Red Tent. And it's all about being a good girl. Because Alan and I spent far too many years thinking that the only way to get love was by being good. And culturally, as females, and from a very young age, we are conditioned to be the good girl and do the right thing. I get it as a parent with a very young child. It's a really fine line between me not wanting her to be conditioned to do what everybody wants, but also needing her to do certain things for her own safety. I have a tendency, as you know, because I say this at the beginning, everyone, to waffle. So I'm going to go to Helen so that she can have some more time to start.
Thanks, Waffler. I think, you know what, this has been coming up for us for, I'd say maybe the last 2 years, where we're constantly like this, and actually we don't talk about it openly. And even when we started the whole Red Sisterhood thing, we didn't even talk into this aspect of it, I don't think. And again, we had a conversation last week when we were in the middle of a forest and we were talking about children and the way that children conform and learn in schools and the differences in genders and stuff, and it came up again then. And actually, and you're right, you're now thinking of it from your perspective as a mother, whereas previously you've been on the receiving end of it, the kind of conditioning in our society and culture. However, I also think we need to talk about this not just from our experience, because obviously we're going to, and I'm sure people will resonate that are listening, but actually from the kind of awareness raising challenging part of it as well, because it's that whole you don't know what you don't know. Like when everyone's doing, you don't see any different. And I think that until we start going, this is our experience, this is actually how we're kind of overcoming and working through this. However, it's okay that we're here because society didn't know any different. And as a parent, especially, I've got a boy and a girl, my parenting is different, and whether that's because their gender and I'm having to challenge that I'm treating them differently, whether it's that there's a big age gap, whether it's that I've developed as a parent, I honestly don't know, but I'm so open to being challenged on anything that could have detriment long term for my children and learn and do better. So I think that's part of it as well. It's not just about us sharing our experience, it's about saying you might not have heard of what we're talking about, so maybe just be open to thinking, does this appear in your world anywhere?
Yeah, that's totally true. And I think, like you said there as well, it's a generational thing, isn't it? And each generation can only try and do better than the one before. And it's so hard, especially when you're self-aware, because when I was away at the weekend, at a family function, the lads were playing with a Nerf gun, shooting people. And my sister-in-law got shot. And my mother-in-law was like, well, don't stand in the line of fire. Boys and the toys. And I was like, whoa, do not say that in front of Winter. Never, ever say that in front of Winter, especially if she gets older. And I was like, But this is it. This is the cultural conditioning that it's okay that they were pounding people with Nerf guns because they're boys and they're toys. You got pounded with a Nerf gun because you just stood in their way while they were doing what boys with their toys do. It's like,
boys will be toys.
And then it got, Luke laughs at me and he says, have you got any soapbox? And I must have got on my soapbox probably about 30 times over the weekend. And when he said that to me, my brother-in-law laughed for about 10 minutes, so he clearly was like, I've got on my soapbox. And I get that. But for me, Winter has been given a lot of dolls and prams, and that's fine as long as she's then going to get other toys. And I would also want to think that if I had a boy, that they would also get them dolls and a pram. But I know that they wouldn't, and I would have to challenge them on that. And when I said that to my brother-in-law, the other brother-in-law, he was like, yeah, I totally get it. And, I think everyone should be able to express themselves and wear whatever they want. But I would be uncomfortable if my son just suddenly started wearing all those clothes because he struggled enough in certain environments anyway without having to add that to the mix. And then I was like, look, I'm not here, a parent telling you how to parent your child, none of my business. You have to do you. And ultimately your child will decide what's right for them anyway. And I think it is that conditioning from each generation before.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always remember this when my two were little. So when my son started playing with toys, his older sister would have been 7 and he would have been 2. And actually I remember thinking he did like my mother-in-law he got obviously the Nerf guns, the hammers, the boy stuff, and she obviously had the dolls, the prams and blah blah blah. But I thought it was interesting him growing up because the house was full of toys like whatever toys you could dream of. Like there was kitchens, there was dolls, prams, there was the Nerf guns, there was boy stuff. God damn it, even saying it, boy stuff. And actually, the stuff that he was naturally drawn to and would play with would be what we would typically buy him as a boy. But I just found that really interesting. However, I know my friend's got little boys and he has a pram and he has a kind of, it's a baby. It's that baby out of The Incredibles. Yeah. In the pram, and he cares for it. And I'm like, that's so lovely. Like, and I'm just like looking, like the prams that you get in the shops are all pink, and like, actually, when we're open to boys playing with, we've totally gone off course here, but we're open to boys playing with other stuff. They learn domestic skills as well. It's like and it's his baby, like
100%, and it's fostering that nurturing and the caring from a young age. And when Winter was getting bought dolls, I instinctively was like, oh, why are we conditioning girls to take care of things? But if it had been a boy, she wouldn't have got that because they wouldn't have wanted a condition to take care and nurture from a young age. And I think it is very much about giving them the option, so not going too far one end where you don't give them the option to choose. Like you said, your little boy had boys and girls toys. He could choose. His choice was to go for what we typically, and we hate saying things like this, but in terms of explanation, you can't avoid it. What's typically, called masculine toys. So it is from that very young age conditioning you to be good and take care of things, take care of your baby. And we were like, okay, she can have a doll, but let's call her a friend. We've just given up on that now because everyone calls her, oh, is it your baby? And I think she's one, it's not her baby. Not her baby, like she might not ever want babies. She might decide she doesn't ever want children. But it's getting off your high horse, and as my husband likes to say, getting off my soapbox enough to think, do you know what? She can have all toys.
And we're never going to get this right. Like,
no.
Maybe we will go to the extremes sometimes because of how we feel and then rein it back in or be pulled back in by our hubbies or whatever. But I think, and I was smirking to myself when you were talking, because I was like, we do not do things by half, Lise. Like, we have this thing and we're like, yeah, let's face it, let's take on a societal norm, let's challenge it from our experience. But I get it, and it's so important that we do it. But also I'm aware that there might be people listening now going, what are these two on about? And I think that having experienced playing the role of what a girl is and growing up in what society deems, and it's not just that, there's obviously the things like kids should be seen and not heard and all that stuff. But in your experience, how has growing up and playing the good girl been detrimental to you, Lise?
Probably more than I am even aware of, and I think I'm very self-aware, because it's now part of my core programming that to be accepted, to be liked, and in the extreme, to be loved, you have to be good, you have to be perfect. And if you're not, then that love is taken away. It's unconditional. It's conditional, sorry, not unconditional. So I set this impossible bar for myself to be the good girl. And my embodiment of the good girl was not causing problems for other people, not bringing my stuff to the forefront. So what we talked about in the last episode, all that toxic positivity of always smiling. And if someone had upset me, or if I was upset, not bringing that in, because who wants to deal with that? And not challenging, which now probably people wouldn't believe that I would agree with something that I didn't agree with. But yeah, that probably didn't answer your question, but I think it affected my relationship with myself and with everyone else, because it robbed me of a lot of really good relationships because I was never truly myself. So,
I totally relate to that. And again, it probably links back to what we were speaking about in the last episode in terms of that whole being ourselves in our truth and actually doing that. That's exactly how I would describe my experience of kind of being the good girl. It was kind of like not being a burden on people, smiling, not having human emotions, like, do you know, like, and it's laughable now because we teach this stuff in our children's well-being, and actually we advocate for this stuff, like we kind of embrace our humanness and all, don't we? And actually it's that you know when something's off, you know when somebody's authentic, you know when something isn't right. And actually when we are truly ourselves, we attract the right people. It's just that maybe took us a long time to learn that because we were too busy being what we thought everyone else wanted us to be.
Yeah, and in the most extreme cases, that was really damaging, because part of being a good girl is not saying no, because your feelings and what your needs are more important than mine. So getting yourself in really quite dangerous or toxic situations because you're unable to say no. Because how dare you say no to somebody? Like, come on. And that comes with all of the core programming from a child and the good girl, you know, and I'm sure we've mentioned this several times about we being really adamant now, children are asked if they want to give cuddles or they want to give kisses, and to say no to grown-ups and to us if we're doing something that they don't want.
Yeah, I've met your child. No. no.
No.
I don't want to get dressed, Mummy. No. But that's it. It's kind of like actually letting our children know that they have body autonomy, that they have choice, and that they can say no, they can express, and we're all about owning our humanness. So if ever we made a mistake, we would apologize to our children if we handled something not great. It is all them things so that they feel more equal to us. And obviously certain things where we do have to put our foot down for their safety. It's finding that balance. But actually, I think that as parents, we need to lead by example. And in terms of the good girl, when we're saying you don't have to be the good girl, we're not saying go out there and use escapism behaviour and toxic behaviours and relationships and coping mechanisms. There's ways to not be the good girl, to embrace your maybe what we would call our wilder side, our humanness, that is healthy, and it's expression and it's communication and it's boundaries and it's all these other things that isn't what we would deem probably being wild, like as the opposite of the good girl.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Helen said, we had a really great conversation about this on Friday during some non-verbal communication training. And we were discussing how behaviour and certain neurodiverse conditions are displayed differently in boys and girls. And again, we said that we just genuinely really believe, and this is a belief, Helen and I will always say they're our beliefs, we're not saying it's fact, it's just our belief from what we've looked at. It genuinely is a belief that the reason it's displayed so differently in girls is because we are taught or we learn much earlier to conform, and more girls conform in school than boys. And when I'm talking about conform, I'm talking to the extreme, where you don't often realise a child is struggling because their behaviour and their difficulties are turned inward, so they excel and almost become so perfect and get all the right grades and become really helpful because they're struggling with being this obedient good girl.
And I think that's it. It's kind of like in society, our focus probably goes on those that are physically struggling that we can see. But just when you were talking then, I was thinking how growing up as a child, I had high functioning anxiety, like, but externally I had it all going on. I was very outgoing. I had lots of friends. Like I was doing really well in school. Had great time with my family. And actually inside I was one massively empathetic and picking up on so much that I wasn't even aware of energetically. It's only when I've got older now that I'm like, whoa, yeah, okay, makes sense. And just high functioning anxiety. Like I was worried about so much and I was anxious about so much, but there was no telltale signs like externally, and school would never have picked up on it. My family probably would not even aware of it now. Do you know what I mean? That actually, to me, it just goes back to how we're treating each other constantly. Like all of us are kind of walking trauma, and it's going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but all of us are kind of walking trauma. We've all had traumatic events, whether they're big trauma or little trauma. And actually, if we can treat each other like we imagine that they're going through trauma right now, then no matter what they're going through, it's kind of safe bet, isn't it? Like, I think at times when I was growing up and kind of smiling and doing the whole, yay, I'm all good and the good girl kind of thing, there's times when I needed support, but I just couldn't verbalize that or reach out. And then it probably into my 20s, going into an office smiling, bringing everyone would be, oh, you little ray of sunshine, Helen, oh, you this, you that. So on days when I'd had the morning from hell and I'd be driving to work, I'd have to psych myself up to go be that little ray of sunshine. And it's funny because that's how I kind of view that it's like playing a role, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we were talking about anchoring, weren't we, on that same course, and it really is. So when I used to work anywhere, I guess, but probably more than anything when doing bar work or waitressing, you felt like you had to kind of slip that skin on. It's like the selkie. It's like a lot of women wear their seal skin, don't they? We wear our smile, off we go. So I know that we've got you to ask this question before, but in terms of being a good girl, for me, it's now, who am I doing this for? and why am I doing it? And if it isn't for me, and I don't mean that in a selfish way, like, oh, it doesn't benefit me, I'm not doing it. I mean, if this isn't for me, it's for some kind of idea from the past or leaning into that core programming of Good Girl, then I don't do it.
I love that. And I'd just like to add that I'm still a little ray of sunshine now. It's just that I show my human emotions. I probably made it sound like I was like a grumpy little walking around with a rain cloud over my head. But like, you can still do that. I'm still very positive. Yeah. I'm still very optimistic and outgoing and happy, smiley. But in a realistic way and in a healthy way. So if I'm having a bad day, you know, Lisa, I'll come over, I'll have a coffee, I'll feel my emotions, will be there, and then it's gone. Like, there's no kind of toxic positivity where I have to paint on a smile just because I'm coming to see my friend, or it makes other people feel more comfortable. Like, that's another toxic positivity thing, isn't it? And maybe that's another part of why we program unconsciously littlies to just smile and crack on, because it's easier for society, it's more comfortable, people don't have to deal with that. It's like, and
maybe our next show is on the you know, the positivity programming, because it is a huge thing and it has been a massive part of our lives, where we are both genuinely very positive people, we're both very optimistic, and we always see the good not just in people but in any situation, no matter how like catastrophic it's been for us, we've always found the positive. But I think as we've grown, we realise that at times it really has been that it's been really toxic positivity. So maybe the next show we lean into that and we dissect the differences for us and our own experience, because Helen and I aren't telling you how to live your life or that our way is the only way or even the right way. We just come on here and ponder and hypothesize what we believe and feel. Take what you want.
It's interesting because without realising it, both me and you, Lisa, have had very similar experiences, although life hasn't been the same. We've had very similar experiences where we can sit and resonate with each other and chat about this stuff. It'll be interesting when we find a topic where our experiences have been very different or our beliefs are very different, to sit and openly chat about that and be like, that's not how I see it. I feel like we just rock up and we're like, yeah, that's the same for me, that's the same for me. Genuinely, that is our experiences in life. And actually, it's amazing that we have this kind of friendship and business relationship where we can sit and openly talk about stuff that other people experience and maybe just think it's there, maybe feel isolated or think it was their experience. But actually, when we talk together and we recognize that actually this is a thing, and then we see it in other people, we're like, this is a thing, this is going on. And because we love to bite it off more than we can chew, we're always going to bring it to the forefront of everyone's mind, and challenge societal norms and talk about this stuff. And actually, that's so important, because there's so many times that I know we've had conversations and you've shared something, and I've shared something, and it's been like, oh, okay, this wasn't just my experience. This is something that's happening. And yes, you form that connection and all that stuff, but actually you get to see the world for what it really is. And I think only then can we start to challenge the way we're raising children, the way we are acting as a collective. And again, we're not always going to get it right. Like, we're human, we're doing our best, we're learning, and we're open to being challenged and all that stuff. But that's how I genuinely foresee that I'm doing it. If anyone's watching, you think I'm crazy because I'm doing this. Like,
I'm on a soapbox.
I know. I genuinely think that's how we make the world a better place, and that's how we make ourselves better humans. And that's all I think we can, and any of us can kind of want from life, is actually to continue to grow and develop and be the best version of ourselves every day, and actually leave the world in a better state than when we came here. And at the minute, there's so much going on globally that we as humans are negatively impacting on this planet and the world, that actually we can all just do our bit, whether it's minute in our little society collective, or thinking about plastic, or veganism or anything, actually, it's kind of like, what part do you play in this? I'm totally gone off the topic.
No, not at all. Like, it genuinely is that, because there's that old quote, isn't there, that says, when you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. And that is really powerful to me, because if you don't stand for something, then you really do fall for everything, because you're too frightened to say, no, this is what I believe. And we're not saying that our experiences are everyone's experience. We can only come from our own experience. And our experience has been this cultural conditioning of be the good girl and conform and do what society and your parents and your school has told you to do. And it's not as extreme as it was when women were sent to finishing school, but it's still there, and we need to challenge it. So, we're throwing that challenge to you. What is your good girl conditioning, if you have it? And how can you challenge that role for yourself and for other women and girls and children in your life? Because it's really, really important. Anything else you want to add before we close this one?
I feel like we started with a topic, we've done 20 million loop-the-loops, and we rounded up nicely, so thanks, Lisa.
On the register, sure then.
Thank you for joining and, coming on this journey with me and Lisa, because we genuinely, we don't plan these things. We just come, we speak from the heart, we grab a coffee, we record some stuff, and actually we are just speaking from the heart and from our experience, and
while fully trying not to swear.
Yeah, that too. So thank you so much for joining and listening and being here with us, and hopefully you take something away, whether it's just that you resonate with something that we're saying, maybe it's just that you have been made aware of something, or maybe it's challenging your own behaviour and your own beliefs. Thank you.
Bye.